On the 2nd of July, 1992, a man stepped up to a podium in Newfoundland, Canada, and in a single sentence ended 500 years of history. The Canadian Federal Minister of Fisheries and Oceans suspended cod fishing indefinitely. All of it. Effective immediately. Overnight, around 30,000 to 40,000 people lost their jobs, the largest mass layoff in Canadian history. For 5 centuries, the waters off Newfoundland, the Grand Banks, had held some of the richest cod stocks on Earth. When sailors traveled there in 1497, the crew said the fish were so thick you could lower a basket over the side and haul it up full. Maybe slightly exaggerated, but you get the point. And now there was a man at a podium telling everyone to stop. Why? In just 30 years, the cod population in the region had collapsed by a staggering 93%. A spawning population of over 1.5 million tons had fallen to less than 100,000. Then, almost nothing. But the part that should really bother you isn't the collapse. It's that nobody was surprised. The fishermen had watched their nets come up lighter every single year. The scientists had issued the warnings. Everyone could see it coming. And no one stopped. The issue was not that the cod suddenly stopped reproducing, because every boat just kept pulling out a little more than the sea could put back. That's the whole trap in one sentence. A resource everyone shares, drained faster than it can refill because no single person taking a little extra ever feels like the one who broke it. And once you see that shape, you start seeing it everywhere. So here's the question. Why do reasonable people, behaving completely normally, destroy the exact thing they all need to survive? The obvious answer is greed. Somebody got greedy. That's true. People are greedy. But to call fishermen who mostly work for subsistence living is gross oversimplification. But here is where it gets interesting. It isn't just greed. And the man who explained why did it back in 1968. His name was Garrett Hardin, and his idea was so simple. Picture a shared pasture, open to every herder in the village. If you add one more cow to that pasture, you get the full benefit of that cow. All the milk, all the meat. It's yours. But the cost, the overgrazing, the damage to the shared field gets split among everyone. In other words, the benefits are private and the costs are public. So the rational move for every single herder is always the same. Add one more cow. Everyone follows flawless, sensible individual logic, straight off a cliff. Hardin called it the tragedy of the commons. And the horror of it is that there's no villain. Nobody has to be evil. Doing the reasonable thing is the action. And you have watched smaller versions of this your entire life. The office fridge everyone takes from and nobody restocks. Rush hour traffic where every driver merging in is behaving perfectly reasonably, and the result is a jam that helps no one. A buffet line, a group project. Same trap, every time. The benefit is yours, the cost is everyone's. So the math quietly points every reasonable person toward ruin, which is a genuinely bleak thought. Because if that logic is really airtight, then every shared resource in human history should already be gone. But they're not. High in the Swiss Alps, there are villages that have shared the same grazing pastures for more than 800 years and never wrecked them. 800 years. The same commons, the same slopes, passed down through 30 generations, still there. So somebody broke Hardin's law. The question is how, and the answer comes from a woman who did something economists mostly hadn't bothered to do. She went and looked. Her name was Elinor Ostrom. And instead of sketching a pasture on a napkin, she spent decades gathering real ones. More than 1,000 actual communities around the world, managing real forests, fisheries, and water. Swiss pastures, Japanese village woodlands, Spanish irrigation networks 1,000 years old. In 2009, she won the Nobel Prize in economics for what she found. And what she found was this. The communities that survived weren't more moral than the ones that collapsed. They weren't less greedy. They just had a few things in common. Clear boundaries around who was in and who was out. Rules they had made themselves. A way to watch each other, and small fair penalties when someone cheated. Put simply, the survivors could see each other. And seeing each other changes the math completely. When the person you'd be shortchanging knows your name, the cost of taking too much stops being shared and starts becoming personal. Your reputation is on the line. Tomorrow, you'll need a favor from these same people. Take more than your share, and everyone knows and everyone remembers. Suddenly, the sensible move isn't to grab one more cow. It's to protect the thing you all depend on, because you will answer for it if you don't, which quietly reframes the entire problem. The tragedy of the commons was never really about morality. It's a coordination problem. The resource doesn't die because people are bad. It dies because they can't coordinate who takes what. Build the channels to coordinate, a way to talk, to watch, to hold each other to it, and the trap springs open. It's solvable, which sounds like a happy ending. So just get everyone to cooperate, and we're fine. Except coordination has a brutal enemy, and its name is size. Back in 1965, an economist named Mr. Olson showed something uncomfortable. The bigger the group, the harder it becomes for that group to act in its own shared interest. More people to watch, more places to hide, and a smaller, thinner stake for each person in protecting the whole. In a tiny group, your cheating is obvious, and your share actually matters. In a huge one, you're invisible, and your slice feels like a rounding error. A dozen villagers can keep an eye on one pasture. 8 billion strangers cannot keep an eye on one atmosphere. Oh, here comes the climate change talk again. And there it is. The real variable was never human nature. It was scale. Hardin's trap doesn't spring because people are selfish. It springs when the people sharing a resource can't see or talk to or hold each other accountable, when they've become strangers. And here's the uncomfortable part. The bigger the commons, the more strangers it contains. A village pond has a few dozen users who all know each other's faces. The ocean has millions who never will. So the resources hardest to save aren't the ones we care about least. They're the ones that have grown too big for anyone inside them to see everyone else. Which is exactly what happened on the Grand Banks. The cod didn't die because fishermen were greedy. They died because the commons had quietly outgrown every person in it. Factory ships from a dozen different nations hauling in secret thousands of miles apart with no shared rulebook and no way to watch each other. A village pasture had swollen into an international free-for-all. Nobody could see everybody, so everybody kept adding one more cow. And this isn't ancient history. Right now, nearly 38% of the world's fish stocks are being pulled up faster than they can recover, more than a third of them. The cod were not a fluke. They were a preview. So is that it? Are we just doomed at scale? Here's the part of Ostrom's work that usually gets left out. When Hardin looked at his pasture, he saw only 2 ways to save it. Either carve it up into private property so each person owns a slice and protects it, or hand it to a government strong enough to force everyone to behave, fences or police, owners or the state. Ostrom found a third way. Over and over in those 1,000 communities, people governed themselves. No private owners, no outside enforcer. They sat down, made their own rules, and watched their own commons. Not because someone forced them to, because they could still see each other, and they knew it. Which means the tragedy was never a law of nature. It's a design problem, and design problems have solutions. So think about the cod one more time. In the end, only one thing brought them back. Not cooperation, not clever rules, a total ban. For 32 years, the government simply locked every last person out of the water. And only now, after 3 decades of forced silence, are the cod finally beginning to return. Still a shadow of what they once were. That is what it costs when we let a commons grow beyond our ability to see each other. Not a lecture, not a fine. A whole generation locked out of their own sea. And you are running this exact experiment constantly. The shared fridge, the group project, the road, the planet. Every one of them is a small test of the same question. And it was never the question you thought it was. It was never whether people are good. It was whether we can build a way to watch each other, even when there are far too many of us to ever meet. We don't destroy the things we all need because we stop caring about them. We destroy them the moment we can no longer see the others who need them too.